Welcome to Mind the Chatter, podcast where we break down mental health one conversation at a time. I'm your host Lilian, and with me is my co-host Peter.
Hi.
As we were considering the topic for this episode, we tried to look at what common themes we get in therapy, and what really popped out was a client is going to come and they'll talk about, I've been feeling anxious, I've been feeling confused, I've been feeling depressed. And so the topic for today, emotions.
Emotions. So maybe a brief definition would be in order. Emotions are essentially your brain and body's way of reacting to things that happen, and they help you figure out what's important, how you feel about it, and what to do next.
Yeah, but emotions tend to have a bad rap. Whenever someone says you're being emotional or they talk about you're catching feels, there's always that negative quote around it.
And I'm thinking if I say my friend is emotional, probably the image you have in your head is of this person who's very easily triggered. You know, they're like really excitable. So too angry, too happy, too sad, like too something. So we always have this connotation of emotional is equals to overdoing something, and you're supposed to be stoic.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea that a lot of clients come with in therapy, because you ask a client, so what were you feeling? Or you'll mention that in part of my therapy, we are going to be talking about emotions, and you literally see them shrink or kind of withdraw. They don't want to talk about
I'd
it.
say this especially happens with male clients. I mean, it happens with female clients as well. But
Yeah.
with a male client, you say, we're going to be delving into emotions, and you can see them shrug or just, go back a little. So what I like introducing the idea of emotions by using an analogy. I'll use a car dashboard analogy. So there is warning lights and symbols. And the whole idea is there's nothing inherently good or bad about the lights or symbols. They're just telling you what's going on inside the car. If you see one telling you you're low on fuel, it's just telling you need to go and probably pass by the
Petrol station where you refill. I'd talk about others, but the most I know about a car dashboard is the seatbelt light and...
now I feel like we're being sexist, and it's ironic you're the one who's being sexist.
No, I'm being very personal.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm trying to share personal details about my life here. Anyway, continue.
So, as I was saying before, my car challenged co-host jumped in. When you look at the symbols, they just tell you what's going inside. If you see a check engine light on, it just means something is going on over there and you probably need to go to a mechanic. There's nothing right or wrong about it. And it's the same thing with emotions. If I'm feeling angry, it's telling me something about what's going on inside. Maybe something has happened in my life which is making me angry and I need to react.
Yeah, it's just a symbol. It's not to say that you're being negative or you're being too much. It's just showing you that something is happening and bringing your attention to it.
Disregarding or labeling your emotions as good or bad is very unhelpful. And a little bit of theory, emotions are fundamentally adaptive. And you can think of this as whenever you have an emotion, it's meant to help you. So my co-host will give an example.
What I'm thinking of is like the crudes, cavemen, kitambo. These emotions were kind of warning signs for you. If you saw something at a distance and they're coming towards you, the aspect of fear that came up would probably lead to your survival.
So think about it. You're walking on a park and then there's grass and then you see something moving and you perceive that it's a snake. Your instinct is to either flee or think of a way to
Get a big stone.
get a cage whereby you're going to put the snake inside because you want to conserve it. We don't believe in killing animals just because they've scared you.
We're in Kenya. No one is going to be looking for a cage.
Anyway, you've seen a snake and your reaction will be fear. And that fear is good because the fear will tell you to either run away or stand and fight.
Yeah, or even think about a social situation. You're walking back home and then you notice that your baby brother is being bullied by a bigger kid. You'll obviously get angry, and that anger is gonna direct how you're gonna respond to that situation.
Yeah, and by being angry, you probably will act more assertive, and then whoever is invading is going to, see, oh, this person is confronting me.
Yeah.
So the idea over here is that emotions tell you what's important and what you need to attend to. So there's always a need behind an emotion. If you can think of an emotion, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, there's always a need behind it.
Yeah. In more technical terms, maybe I'd say an emotion shows that there's a need, and then the need gives you direction on how to meet the need. So let's talk a little bit about emotions and what they look like. One, emotions are not just things you can name like anger, sadness, joy. They start with body sensations. For example, when I'm angry, there's this hot feeling that starts coming up. Or when I'm feeling sad, I'll feel vulnerable and I'll feel almost small, I guess.
All right. So what you're trying to say is there's some bodily sensation or even maybe visual images that come with the emotions.
Yeah, and then fear is depicted very well in cartoons. The way hairs like stand on your spine and all that. So they always have a bodily sensation that goes with it. Then there are visual images. I'm sure you've had people talk about I saw red when they get angry. Yeah, so there's even a visual aspect of the emotion that you're feeling.
So far we've been talking about emotions as these discrete things, and you might have the impression that you only have one emotion at a time, and that's not necessarily it. You can have multiple emotions, either one after the other or at the same time.
Yeah, and that reminds me, there's a time I was doing a sales job, and whenever the boss would get all in our faces about how we're not making sales, I'd mostly have like three emotions running at the same time. And I'd find I'm angry at my boss, but at the same time, I'm fearful. I don't want to go ahead and reveal this anger because he is my boss. I might lose my job. So, yeah.
So you might have two emotions either working with each other or contradicting each other. Like in your case, you're feeling fearful, but you're also feeling angry. And it can be very confusing. I mean, thinking about you're like, okay, what am I feeling?
I know. What do I respond to?
So now that we understand what emotions are and why they matter, let's break down the different ways they can show up. And that's what psychologists call emotion response forms.
So, we've mentioned that emotions are adaptive. They have a purpose, either to protect or to direct. The types of response forms are adaptive and maladaptive. Adaptive emotions are emotions that, one, come up in the situation, they are appropriate to the situation, and once the situation has passed, the emotion passes.
And you can think of this as anger when you feel like there's a violation of your boundaries and they help you become assertive, like in the example you just gave.
Yeah, you're able to reaffirm that boundary with whoever is making you angry. And then there's fear. Fear usually signals a threat or danger, and it triggers the fight or flight response. Then there's sadness. Sadness usually indicates that you've lost something or there's a need that is not being met. And most of the time, it helps you reflect and seek comfort from those around you. Then finally, there's joy. This signals pleasure. And you see this a lot in children. When something excites a child, you will know that it's excited them. It's very obvious. They'll be laughing, they'll be throwing their hands up, they'll be jumping up, and all that. So, those are the adaptive.
Maladaptive emotions are emotional responses that are learned from past experiences, and often these are painful and or even traumatic experiences, and they no longer help you in the present.
An example would be you've said no to a friend, and this is a friend who comes through for you a lot, but you actually have really good reasons for saying no. Then suddenly you're plagued with this intense guilt that you're not showing up for your friend.
Okay, yeah. And it could also be you feeling like intensely anxious before you give a presentation, even though you're like quite ready for it. And probably this is because in the past, you've been embarrassed or judged for the way you made your presentation. So this at the back of your mind, you're just thinking, somebody will judge me or somebody's going to tease me.
Yeah, and then a very common one is feelings of jealousy. You are in a relationship where your partner probably cheated on you or was entertaining these other relationships that weren't making you feel safe in the relationship. And now you're with another person, but you still find your instinct is to go through their phone, check if they're talking to other girls and things like that. This is something you've learned from feeling all very replaceable in the last relationship that doesn't quite apply to this one.
And these emotions may have made sense at the time they were learned, but they are no longer helping you in the current situation, and that's what makes them maladaptive. Then we can move on to secondary reactive emotions. And these ones are like a reaction to a reaction. So you're feeling one thing, but then you end up either blocking it or overlaying some other emotion.
This actually fascinated me the first time I learned about it. Have you ever noticed how most guys react to bugs or snakes? There's always this aspect of aggression that comes out.
I'm just thinking of locusts. In my building, there was this locust. I saw it and I just wanted to crush it, but I didn't. I looked for a giant. I saved it.
We totally believe you. Anyway, there's usually this instant reaction. The person is gonna jump away from the insect. And then it's almost like they're insulted that this insect would scare them this much. And so they find the worst way to deal with it.
And the idea here is you're feeling scared or you're feeling fear, but instead of letting that fear show, you're going to react by being angry. And then anger comes around with aggression. So you end up doing something aggressive.
Yeah, and if you think about it, anger has an aspect of control. And it's mostly brought out to cover up an aspect of vulnerability.
So instead of you being over there all out of control, I'm afraid, you're going to show some assertive anger, which in some other case would be good, but in this case.
And the other kind of emotions are instrumental emotions. And whenever I think about instrumental emotions, I think about these movies where girls are being courted by guys. There's always this aspect of the guy will pretend to be shy, and that will evoke a response from the guy.
I don't think anybody will relate with you, but carry on.
Oh no, enough people have watched Bridgerton. We know what we're talking about. Anyway, so instrumental emotions are emotions that come up with an intended response. For example, a person starts crying. Or let's even think of a child. A child will make a mistake, and the moment you ask them, "Ni nini umefanya?" they start crying because they immediately know they're in trouble. And if they cry, you're gonna soothe them rather than punish them for what they've done.
And when it comes to relationships, you can think of an instance whereby your partner is angry at you, and then you just turn all sad, and your intention is you want them to get over their anger. And most times it works.
Yeah, and tears do destabilize guys very quickly.
Oh, yeah. When a girl brings out the waterworks, a guy is just going to, if you are all mad at her, suddenly you're apologizing and trying to figure what's going on wrong. And a lot of women have learned that, so long as I start crying, the guy is going to be besides himself trying to figure what's wrong. So that's an instrumental emotion.
Yeah, and then you kind of get away with whatever mistake you'd made. And I'm not saying this as a water worker.
So we've established that emotions are important and should not be seen as bad.
Yep.
But just because emotions are important, it doesn't mean that they are always easy to deal with.
So sometimes emotions hit fast and sometimes they sneak up on you. You might not even realize how you're feeling until you snap at somebody or you do something and you can't quite understand it.
And I'd say this is where emotional regulation comes in. So it's not about ignoring your emotions. It's more like learning how to drive. Say, for example, in bad weather, the road is still there and you're still going to go where you need to, but you have to know how to adjust. So either slow down, turn on your lights, or
Skid
wipers.
in the mud.
Or skid in the...
Yeah, there's like controlled skidding where you're kind of allowing the car to go where it wants to go, but not quite.
Please don't take any driving advice from this podcast. So let's talk about how you can learn how to tune into your emotions, respond to them more effectively, and in a manner of speaking, stay in the driver's seat even when things are feeling a little overwhelming.
And this is what we call regulation. So emotion regulation is the ability to understand, express, and manage emotions in ways that reduce distress and support your needs and goals.
And something important is, where do we learn how to do this? And early attachment experiences are important. And this is the kind of relationships you have with your caregivers at an early age.
Yeah, and probably here we'd even speak to parents of young children. Whenever you respond to their emotions, you kind of teach them how to deal with them or how to respond to them or how to regulate them. For example, if a child is sad and they're crying, giving them a hug helps them kind of navigate through that sadness.
And part of the problem over here is that most people either weren't taught how to regulate their emotions.
We were given reasons to regulate the emotion by force. For example, you'd be crying and then you'd be told, unalia, unataka tukupatie reason ya kulia. So it was always more a threat, control yourself.
Yeah, so you never got to learn how, if I'm sad, what I need is to be told everything is going to be okay or to be soothed.
Yeah.
And you can think of a good example of a parental model whereby you have a kid and then the kid has, say, bumped on a desk and then they're crying. And then the parent is going to hit the desk and go like, just hit the desk and tell it,
Mbona umechapa toto?
yeah, that. So the idea over here is your kid is hurting and then you're showing some anger towards this inanimate object, but it's communicating to the child that you're being protective. And the child kind of gets to learn that, when I'm sad, when I'm afraid and in pain, somebody's going to do something protective.
Oh yeah, and that paints a lovely picture.
Of course it does.
Emotional regulation kind of keeps us grounded. It enables us to go with the situation and make better decisions and respond in ways that kind of align with the situation. But when we quite don't know how to regulate, or we've never learned how to regulate, then things get very tricky. Yeah, so let's talk about emotional dysfunction. And that's when regulation isn't quite there.
And these can manifest in the form of anxiety, depression, substance use, eating too much or too little, or even self-harm. And then you can have cases whereby somebody is either over aroused or under aroused. And
Like the words just say it, being over aroused is a situation comes up and your reaction, even though appropriate, is a little bit too much.
yeah, so you can think somebody has made you sad, but your sadness just overwhelms you and you can't even get out of bed and you
Yeah.
just can't function.
And then the opposite of that is now being under aroused. A situation demands a certain level of reaction, and instead, your reaction is very low key.
Yeah. And if you're a person who suffers from, say, over arousal, probably you'll just tell yourself, I don't want to go there.
And like with every situation that is overwhelming, we tend to avoid it. So people who become over aroused tend to avoid situations where any emotion will be triggered because they don't want to get to a point where they're over aroused. I have a friend who would not want to get into arguments, and that was because she knew anytime she got angry, she'd get very tearful and she'd be crying her eyes out and not quite say what she needs to say in the situation. So instead, she'd avoid arguments.
Yeah. So you either avoid that situation or you end up suppressing your emotions because you don't want that, whatever the outcome is, and you end up suppressing because it's uncomfortable.
So a lot of avoidance usually presents as suppressing emotions. And the problem with suppressing unwanted emotions is, for example, you've been teased by people about a certain thing. Let's say it's not growing a beard. So there are people who've been teasing you about it, and instead of responding to them,
We're assuming you're a man.
yes, totally.
If you're a woman and you're being teased about not growing a beard, change your friends.
We have little mustaches and they're normal. Anyway, so yeah, so your friends have been teasing you about not growing a beard.
Because you're a man.
Yeah, and it's been making you angry. But instead of responding to that anger or telling them off, you've been laughing it off and keeping it building up. So finally, some random human mentions something about, hey, where's your beard? Are you even a man? And all that pressure that had been building up then comes out in aggression.
Yeah. So that's the problem with suppressing. But then again, as we've said, we understand why somebody might choose to suppress an emotion because you're uncomfortable with the emotion that comes up.
Beyond dysfunction, emotions can be a problem in several ways. For instance, if you're not able to access your emotions.
As we've said, emotions give you information about what's going on and needs that you should attend to. So if you can't access that, then you lose that information.
Yeah, and in very extreme situations, it brings out this feeling of, I'm just going through the motions.
As we'd indicated, we'll be providing some tools and techniques to hopefully help you deal with issues. And in this case, it's how to deal with your emotions.
Yeah, so probably let's start with labeling your emotions. And with labeling your emotions, it helps you kind of understand better what's going on with you. When I started therapy, I realized that a lot of clients would come and I'd ask them, what were you feeling? Or what are you feeling? And they'd say, I was feeling bad. But bad is such a blanket word. There are so many things that could be in bad. And when it's so blanketed, it can be overwhelming because you don't quite get to pinpoint what's going on. And like we said before, once you know what's going on, you're able to identify the need. For example, in the bad, let's say what's actually going on is that you're feeling sad, then we can get to find out what's making you sad. And it could be you're feeling lonely and alone, and thus the sadness.
As we said, your emotion is telling you of there's a need. So behind the sadness, if it's loneliness, then you can do something about it.
Yeah, you can get to reach out to someone and feel a little better.
But if you just maintain, I'm feeling bad, then you don't really know what's causing the badness and you can't react to it.
Yeah, so probably to start with, you can enlarge your vocabulary on what emotions are there. I've seen in several movies someone has a chart and then they're able to pinpoint, okay, I think I'm feeling this. That way, you're able, one, to get the full range of emotions, and then two, you're able to identify exactly what need is there.
And I think I can also add that whenever you have a feeling, take a moment and try to figure what's the feeling, label it. So that's a very good place to start. So once you've enhanced your vocabulary, you can just label it. And then if you can label and go like, I'm feeling afraid, so there's fear, then after that, you can figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, or what exactly is causing it.
Okay. So the second thing would be emotional tracking. This involves checking in with how you're feeling over the course of the day. So you'll just tell your client to come up with a form whereby they write time of day, what are you feeling, and what's going on.
And what this does is it brings your emotions to awareness. This is a really good technique for people who either are under aroused or have very little awareness of their emotions.
Yeah, but it can also work with people who are over aroused because you'll get to label your emotion and then see what are the triggers, what caused me to feel overwhelmed at a certain time.
Yeah, and once you're able to name something, it becomes a little less scary. Yeah, another thing is, and we talked about this a lot in the last session, seeking support. Whenever people respond to your emotions, it is very validating, and then it makes you feel better in some way. If you're feeling sad and you reach out to someone and they respond by being there for you in your sadness, it allows you to feel seen.
Another technique would be engaging in constructive outlets to express your emotions. So you can engage in emotive writing, and this would be,
Writing in a way that is meant to get in touch with your emotions. Actually, if someone else read this, they would be able to tap into what was going on for you. For people I've had who do this, it's mostly I write poetry when I'm feeling a certain type of way, or I will write a story when this is going on in my life.
then you can also engage in singing.
And this one, I think a lot of people do because there are enough playlists that are titled Sad Songs.
And the curious thing is that you can listen to somebody singing and kind of tell what mood they're in just based on their voice.
Yep. Then there's journaling. Journaling generally enables you to keep track of what's going on in your day or what's going on in a certain situation. There are other activities that people are told to take up to vent. I think vent is the perfect word to use in this case. For example, in the campus where I studied, there used to be a corner that was for screaming, and it was like for the people who are doing really intense courses. I've also heard of these houses where you can go and break stuff. You'll be given a hammer and protective clothes, and then you'll start breaking stuff. There are things like boxing. I wonder what you think about these activities.
Even as you are talking, I see how most people would think, I'm feeling angry. I have all this pent up energy, and then I'll go and box, and then I'll get out of there feeling like I've had a release. And I think this is actually called the catharsis hypothesis, and it borrows from Freud, whereby you'll have a release after you've gotten rid of the pent up energy. And research has shown that venting anger is not effective and it actually leads to reinforcing aggression. There's this research which was carried out in 1999, whereby it was in a university. So they had a bunch of college students, and the research was you were supposed to write about a controversial subject. So you sit there, you write about a controversial subject, and then you're graded. But you're told that you're going to be graded by your peer, and you know who's grading you. So you write and then you give it to them. What you don't know is that your professor who's running the experiment is the one who actually goes ahead and grades you, and he gives you very bad remarks, like very bad feedback. Like, this is the shittiest thing I've ever read.
Huh.
This is why are you even in college if this is how you're writing? And the whole idea is he wanted to get you angry. So does that for everybody. So everybody is very angry. And then they split the participants into groups. One of the groups is given a punching bag, and they're asked to vent their anger. Picture the person you're angry at as you're punching. Then another group is told to do nothing.
That professor was very smart. He didn't want to be the target, but he's making the other classmates the targets.
Yeah. And then after that, there was part 2 to the experiment, whereby now you got to play a game with the person who had graded you. And the game was a reaction game. Something is on your screen and you're supposed to react. So the person who wins is the person who reacts a little bit fast. And then you can punish your opponent by blasting something in their headphones.
A chance for revenge.
Exactly, a chance for revenge. And what they found out was that people who had engaged in this whole boxing, they ended up blasting their opponents at a higher intensity and for longer.
Huh.
And that's how they were measuring aggression. So at the end, they found out when you vent your negative energy or your anger by punching, it actually ends up making you more aggressive.
Yeah, and you can explain that in a psychological perspective. One, you're learning that anger equals aggression. And then two, we'd mentioned that if you repeat something over and over again, it's almost like you're training a muscle. And so you actually strengthen your aggressive tendencies. So yeah, those people who are going to the gym because work is a little bit too intense, find other ways.
Not the gym, specifically punching or yelling. And maybe you should even think about people you know who have a habit of screaming into pillows or punching things when they are angry, and then just see if they are less angrier at the end or in general, or they're more angry. And I'm willing to bet they're going to be more angry. It doesn't take away their anger.
So the lesson here is eventually that face on your pillow is going to become your boss's face.
So it's better to do nothing. But even a better alternative would be engaging in deep breathing or learning how to reframe your thoughts, or even, just engaging in problem solving instead of punching at a pillow with somebody's face on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah. And finally, I think there's the aspect of self-soothing, learning how to regulate yourself by almost
Are you thinking of saying sucking your thumb?
I am thinking of it, but that's for babies. But I'm also thinking there are things like you'll see a baby get very agitated, and then when they're done crying, they'll suck their thumb and they'll find some form of
We're
peace.
hoping there are no babies listening to us. So, as an adult or teenager, self-soothing might be just telling yourself affirming things. I got this.
Yeah, I see that. I see how that would work. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Yeah. Basically, just telling yourself that it's okay, I'm going to be okay. So that can be soothing. And if you are feeling sad and then you tell yourself everything is going to be okay, odds are you'll just, make yourself feel a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. I have seen that in action, actually.
And self-talk also helps, since a lot of the times your emotions are because you're telling yourself a bunch of negative things about yourself.
Yeah,
So
like the
if you
world is on
can
fire.
so if you can counter them with some positive talk, then that can be a very good way to regulate your emotions.
Yep.
As we are winding down, we hope that you've learned that emotions aren't your enemy and they can actually be some of your best guides. And learning to understand and regulate them takes practice, but it's one of the most important skills you can build.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in to Mind the Chatter. In the show description, you'll find resources of some of the things that we mentioned in the equipping section, and you can also find how to reach us.
See you on the next one.